Okay, what we're going to do in this session is to look at the differential between body shape and height to the head shape. We talked about head shapes last time, so sometimes you may want to do a caricature that has a body attached to it. I found a few images from Victorian caricaturists, and this is kind of highlights a kind of extreme that used to be done in the olden days, and some people still do it today. Where the actual head, if you see here, is disproportionate to the size of the body. And actually, if you look at this one old Victorian caricature, you'll notice that even the quality of the drawing of the body part is quite loose and simple next to the actual head, and this was because they just wanted to make a statement about a political situation or something, and so the main point was to actually make reference to the person. So as long as the face looked alright, the body part didn't need to have that much accuracy or effect in a way. But in a sense, in modern days, you maybe want to do a caricature of somebody and make it a little bit more caricaturized, and one of the ways you can do this obviously is to actually do this process of enlarging the head, or making the head a little bit more disproportionate. Now here's another example of a Victorian one. It's quite a nice example because it's got a disproportionate nose as well. But it's more of a realistic looking body next to the previous one. That's just like really badly drawn. This one actually has a nice stance and everything. But even so, you'll notice that the head has been enlarged to emphasize the point of the actual caricature, which is to take note of the actual person's face. Okay, so this is something you could do in your drawings. And there's another one. It's a little less subtle, but the actual faces are a little bit more realistic. So the actual, you notice the foot's quite big though. And also here, you'll notice he's basically a famous caricaturist himself, so he's actually got pictures of this person on a caricature's body. Let's just do another one. So this one's a little less, but you'll notice because of the way the size of the neck is, you'll notice that it has been proportionally changed. The length of his legs, for instance, is different to the height of his head. So there are different ways to do this, and when I do my caricatures, this is one of my caricatures, even though it doesn't look obvious, that head is slightly bigger than it would be normally. For an actual, if I was doing it as a portrait. So what I have to do is adjust the spacing here, change the shape of the costume and everything, or what he's wearing, to allow for the fact that the neck and the head is going to be a little bit bigger. Another one. This one's a little bit easier because what you got here is roughly the same size neck, but the head has been made bigger, and because he's got this pizza shape, if you remember head shapes, because he's got this pizza shape one, it allows for the neck to be quite thin, and so it looks nice. Okay, if you look if you know anything about human anatomy, you'll know the head's bigger because the shape of the hand is, it needs to go almost the same size from the bottom of the chin to top of his forehead. Okay, another one. Now this one was quite awkward to do because Trump's known for his small hands anyway, but I'll enlarge the head a little bit to allow for the fact. But you'll also notice, because I've enlarged the head, this whole section of his body has been distorted to allow for that, adaptation. Okay, another one. Again, this part of the body has to be pushed sideways either way to allow for the thicker neck to then allow for the head to be placed on. This one was easier because obviously it's just a head splotched on top of the body, but it has been enlarged. Okay, again another one of my caricature friends I did a caricature of, and it's been enlarged again. Luckily his neck's quite thick, so it was again just a case of actually making the head a little bit bigger than it normally is. Another one. Again, this one was able to be roughly the same size. It was probably adjusted slightly, but his head was more enlarged at the top than it was at the bottom, so it allowed for the change as well. And finally, all these, even though they don't seem enlarged, there have been. This one has been with the neck, but basically this one maybe is like, if the normal size, you're talking maybe 25% enlargement, so it does make a noticeable change. It's a shame I can't show you the original photograph I actually based this on, because you actually see that his head probably comes down to about here and his ears are not as wide as that and everything. So these are the things you can look at and think about when you're actually doing caricatures. Either do it the Victorian way, which is doing these enormously large heads and everything, or do it like a little bit like mine, where you have different variations of how big you want your head. But some things to consider I'll show you in the next part, which is actual drawing. Okay, so there isn't that much to consider in this section as far as creative parts of the process, but I just wanted to show you, let's see, for instance, let's do a normal head. Okay, remember how we do set up a normal head, like so. Now if you look at anybody, well, females are a little bit different to men, but if you've got your ears, your neck tends to come out from there. Okay, and then you have a little part that comes down here, and then you have your shoulders coming out, like so. That's how most people have their body structure. Maybe this will be a bit longer. It depends on the face, I suppose, but anyway, let's just say that's your basic typical human head. Okay, now obviously caricaturizing it, you want to do it slightly different. So what you need to do is, if you're doing an enlarged head, let's just make it a lot bigger. Let's just say we're doing a pizza shaped one, so his neck's going to be roughly the same. What you can do is either have your neck come in closer, smaller than that. Okay, like so. Let's just take that off. I have to put it in the background. Just one moment. Okay. So what you can do here is, if you do that, you can reduce the actual neck size, and what this is going to do, is actually create the effect that the head's even bigger than it normally is. Okay, so that's one way you can do it. If, for instance, you want to do it another way, so for instance you want to do that kind of peanut shaped head, one thing you can do is obviously do this small neck again. That makes the head look a little bit bigger. Okay, but if you wanted to keep it so his neck's thick, one thing you have to be aware of is make the head part smaller. Have this and the diamond shaped one. Okay, like that. Instead of it coming down here where the head would normally be, you'd say, for instance, you have it coming out here, so it's like someone like Sylvester Stallone, something you want to give him a thick neck. Okay, you have to then make the adjustment on the shoulder part. And the way you do this, if you notice on my original drawing I did, yeah, okay, you notice it's these parts of your shoulder are basically almost horizontal. What you do with a caricature is you actually make them a little bit shorter and more steeper, like so. Okay, and that will make and emphasize the enormousness of the head. Okay, so these are one of the things you need to consider, which version of the actual head shape you're going to use and how you proportionalize it. Now, saying that, when talking about women, we've got a completely different thing there. I'm just going to have to make a new layer. Oops. Now, women tend to have small necks anyway. Okay, now let's do a typical women shaped head, which in animation terms is called a strawberry head. Like so. It would have the normal size. It would come like this. Typically, you'd have the hair come out like so. Maybe it'll have a. Okay, so let's just say that's a typical starting point for a female head, even though it's a little bit stereotyped and cartoony. Okay, now women's necks are always shown skinnier than they normally would be. Okay, and this is where this shoulder thing comes into effect, you see. So on a woman's you'd even make it even less, so your shoulder would be there. Okay, and that would enlarge the size of the head. There wouldn't be any real reason to have it any less than that, I mean greater than that. You could obviously put your dress on. Okay, and what you need to do is, if you're doing a bit similar to my caricatures that I do, you put the arms in. Okay, and you can then even bring down the shape of the waist as well to make it even more extreme caricaturization. Okay, so this is how you would then consider the different kinds of body shapes. Now if you're doing a whole body, that's a completely different thing. As we've shown with the Victorian ones, you can do it in different ways, like I did the Donald Trump one. But what you could do is like emphasize, I'm just trying to do a standard male body while we're talking. Like so. Okay. Now your hands come down to roughly about where you okay, so this is a rough shape of a male human. Okay, now if you're going to do it as a caricaturized version, something you could do is, as I said, if you want to build a big head, so for instance you're doing something like that, you can bring the neck in small, like I showed you before. And you see how different, even though it's higher than this point here. So for instance it's the same kind of guy, but yeah, what you need to do is then disproportion things on the body. So you need to make sure his body becomes quite short. And then retain the same kind of length legs, because that will help with the caricaturization. Okay, and that's going to obviously help you then build a kind of a more dramatic head for the whole thing. But you can do lots of different ways. It depends on the caricature as well. If it's a short person anyway, you want to think about making his body mass, you know, kind of like down here, and have a really short set of legs. And you would have his head coming into that shape like it was in head shape design, you see. Okay, so you've got to think about who you're doing, but also how much you want to emphasize the head shape. As I said with the Trump, it wasn't as much as this, you know, I basically raised it upwards, so you know his head became this big. Okay, but as I said, I had to then enlarge this part of the body to allow for the shape of the head, because obviously he had a big neck. Okay, so this is all different ways of actually creating head shapes and sitting them on bodies. And when we do the Charlie Chaplin caricature in a minute, well, in the next couple of months, I'll show you how you take his body from the actual original photograph and disproportionalize it to make the head look a little bit more dramatic, and actually change the flow and format of the actual what would be normally a portrait into a caricature. Okay.